Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. This time, we're celebrating America's birthday, the 4th of July, with something that there's nothing more American than. It's WCW, the Great American Bash. 1990, the New Revolution. Kyush, was this not the most American thing you can think of?
I took a moment and I thought about apple pie. And then I took a moment and I thought about hot dogs and American flags and fireworks in the sky. And then I thought, no, when I think of America, I think of Sting, I think of rhinestones, and I think of poorly lit auditoriums. It's WCW, baby.
Yeah. Early 90s WCW. Yes, a show I forced Kyush to cover.
Look, at this point, I get excited for them because
They're
I love
always
seeing,
things they're fascinating because you never know who's going to show up.
yeah.
Aren't these shows perfect for not looking at the card beforehand and just being like, wait, that guy was in WCW? Harley Race was still wrestling in 1990?
These wind up being such a fun watching experience for me because I'm the one who doesn't know anything going in. So yeah, every time I'm just like, wait, The Undertaker's wrestling Lex Luger on this show? Why is Vader here 3 years early?
Yeah, so the most recent thing from this era we've covered is Starrcade 1989. That had the weird, Iron Man round robin tournament that Sting won. He beat world champion Ric Flair, his alleged friend, in the final match to win the tournament. That, you know, would naturally set him up to get a shot at the title, and this was definitely the time to put the belt on Sting. Ric Flair is still the head of the booking committee in early 1990, and he is clearly building his replacement as WCW's top guy in Sting. They have finally decided it's time to go with him. I think it's kind of crazy that he had that Clash of the Champions match with Flair all the way back in 1988, and now in the summer of 1990, they're only just now finally going to put the belt on him. Like, just a totally different timeline than we see in wrestling today.
In fairness, you can kind of understand their hesitance because in 1988, Flair wasn't done yet. It didn't seem like it was necessary to really move on to the next guy. It's kind of like how we always talk about how WWE thought they had like Edge in their back pocket. Like, we don't got to push him now. He's there. He'll just always be there for when we need him. We can heat him back up. It's fine.
And I think Turner buying WCW may have delayed Sting getting the belt because I think they wanted Flair initially. They wanted the most established guy to be the champion. But I think by 90, there's a lot of pressure from Turner to put the belt on somebody new. I mean, there's certainly pressure from Jim Herd, who just hates Ric Flair, thinks Ric Flair is way too old to be the top guy, and is totally ready to push him off the stage.
The other thing is, even if you don't think Sting is ready, there's just nobody else to hold the belt at all. There's not another transitional guy around. There's just nobody. Even like Luger's been pushed down to like a tier below. Like until like Vader heats up later on, like who else is even going to hold the belt? They put it on Steamboat the year before because there just wasn't anybody left.
Now, yeah, yeah, for the next couple of years, it's just Sting and Flair. That's who they've got. And then when Flair, leaves, gets fired the year after this, they have to throw it on Luger, and that doesn't work because it's Lex Luger. I'm not sure he was ever ready to be the world champion. Um, he certainly wasn't here, but fate intervened a few times here. It's time to put the belt on Sting. I'm pretty sure they were going to do it at the Wrestle War pay-per-view in February. But then a couple things happen at the Clash of the Champions in February that builds to that show that screw things up. First, as you would expect, Flair and Arn and Ole turn on Sting because he accepted a title shot against Flair that he had earned by winning the tournament at Starrcade. So they turn on Sting and they beat him up. And the Horsemen are back. They're the bad guys. Sting has a heel faction to work against. Perfect setup. Until the main event, which is a cage match between the Horsemen and Gary Hart's stable. Sting tries to climb the cage to get in to fight the Horsemen. And the plan is security's going to restrain him, and we're going to go off the air with like Sting fighting, trying to get in the cage. And, you got to tune in to see the next show to find out what happened here. The problem is Doug Dillinger, WCW's head of security, pulls Sting off the cage too roughly. Like, he legit pulls him off like he's a fan trying to climb the cage. And Sting lands wrong and tears his ACL.
Whoops, you blew it.
Yeah. Amazing Doug Dillinger's just stuck with WCW until the end after that. Cause
I don't know what kind of dirt Doug Dillinger had on everyone in WCW.
Well, he was a cop in Charlotte, so I think the answer is he had all the dirt on everybody.
That's fair, because that's the only thing that explains how he kept his job. This is not the only time he fucked up.
The disaster of this. Like, Sting is going to win the world title in like 2 weeks, and now he's out at least 6 months. Like,
the entire identity of your brand, the entire future of your company rests on giving him the belt with momentum and getting him going. And you just blew it.
Yeah. You imagine Steve Austin blowing his knee out 2 weeks before WrestleMania 14?
Like, whoops, I guess you're going to keep the belt on Shawn.
Ultimate Warrior busting his... I mean, that's the other thing going on over in the WWF is they're building to Warrior getting the title. And I feel like WCW had some motivation to get the belt on Sting before the WWF could get the belt on Warrior, but that's no longer possible because Sting is clearly going to be out until after WrestleMania now.
Which, I mean, WCW still gets the better of that bargain. I think we can all pretty much agree.
Looking around this roster, I don't see a lot of options to replace Sting here. So
no.
They turned Lex Luger babyface, which I think was their best move. I don't really know what else you would have done.
And it just makes sense that if you're building up to Sting, I mean, you should start building that friendship up. I mean, that's going to be the defining story of both of their careers.
Yeah. But Hurd actually wanted Flair to lose the belt to Luger, and Flair refused to do it. He had promised Sting the belt. He felt like the right thing to do was to put the belt on Sting, and he's right. Like, he's right to refuse to have Luger beat him here. That wouldn't have been the right move.
No, and Ric Flair, for very valid reasons, believed that he should have a say in that. And to be perfectly frank, he should. That's how it used to work.
Both the champion and the head booker at this point.
Yeah. And, like, the entire idea is that he's trying to preserve his legacy. He's trying to choose who's going to carry his torch that he built. He built this company into a national company on the back of his star power. He's got some stroke, is what I'm trying to say.
So, as the story goes, Flair showed up to a house show in Chicago, and he's surprised to see there's a TV crew there. And he, like, asks somebody, like, why do we have the camera guys here? What's going on? They're like, oh, you're losing the belt to Luger tonight. You didn't hear? And he's like, fuck no, I'm not.
Yeah, how...
The hubris of Jim Herd, they thought, like, he could have Flair lose the title and not even tell him until he got to the arena that night.
And, like, this became, like... I guess you gotta understand...
It's the beginning of the end for Flair and WCW. Like,
I guess you gotta understand how wrestling differs from other worlds, right? Like, if you were running a Pizza Hut corporation and one of your employees was like, fuck no, I'm not gonna hire that employee, or fuck no, I'm not gonna promote that guy you want me to promote, you'd be like, okay, well, shut up and you're fired.
Yeah.
In wrestling, it doesn't necessarily work that way.
No, I mean, that's what Herd ends up doing to Flair a year after this, and it leads to him getting fired and throws the company into a tailspin.
Yeah, wrestling is a very complex business model, and you need stars, and Jim Herd did not understand that.
No, he thinks Flair's too old. You know how old Flair was here?
How old is Flair here?
41.
Well, I can't think of anyone who's been any good after 41 years of age.
Yeah, it's so strange. It feels like this is just like this for some reason. Like the late '80s and the '90s were just the one time where guys like in their late 30s or 40s were considered too old to be wrestling stars. Like, it doesn't work that way before this, and it hasn't worked that way since. But for some reason in this era, there was just this obsession that, like, anybody over 38 was an old guy.
There's just this feeling that, like, you got to get the best, youngest, most ripped and muscular and marketable star, and everything is just a pursuit of that goal.
And I understand what they see in Sting. He is the guy. It doesn't end up working out, but it's not Sting's fault. It's WCW's fault for not having anybody to face him when he got the belt.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, we mentioned that there's no one to be a transitional champion for Sting, but what that also means is that when Sting wins the belt, who the fuck is he supposed to face? We're going to go through this card. There aren't a bunch of people missing from it. This is the roster. There's a ton of talent, but no stars.
No, I think the thing that would have made sense to me would have been Luger turning on him.
Which, yeah, at least 10 different
somehow
times.
Lex Luger never turned on Sting. In all the years they were friends, and all the times it seemed obvious it was going to happen, Luger never turned on Sting.
That's probably, like, in a way you could say that that's almost sweet, that they, like, teased that for their entire careers, but no, Luger always stayed loyal. He was always loyal. You were always wrong about him.
Yeah.
But at some point...
Well, this would have been so perfect that, like, Luger... As we'll go into how Luger gets dicked out of the title multiple times here because he's protecting Sting. Yeah. And then he helps Sting win the belt, and Sting gets all the glory, and Sting wasn't there for him when he was getting his shots at the title. It just makes perfect sense that Luger would get bitter and turn on him.
And long term, you can probably make them friends again, like after like some long prorated thing. It's not that Luger's going to go full heel. It's just that he hates Sting now.
Yeah.
For good reason, frankly.
So at Wrestle War, Flair and Luger had a near 40-minute match. Yes, Lex Luger went 38 minutes, and it's a pretty badass match. Tribute to how good Ric Flair was at this point.
I've said that Lex Luger is the platonic ideal of a Ric Flair opponent. Like, when those two got in the ring together, they just produced magic.
I could just watch, like, Luger hit Flair with clotheslines and pose and Flair beg off all day. Like, just give me a Twitter account that's just gifs of that over and over.
Oh, yeah. Nobody ever, like, just picked Flair up like a bag of shit and tossed him over with a body slam like Lex Luger did.
Luger got Flair up in the torture rack. He's about to win the title, but then the Horsemen corner Sting, and they're about to beat him up. So Luger drops the rack, bails out of the match, goes to save Sting, and gets counted out. He gave up the title to save his friend.
Dumb babyface.
I know. Sting shouldn't be at ringside. That's on him.
Yeah, man.
They load up the Horsemen by adding Barry Windham and Sid to the group. I think Windham makes total sense. Sid never really fit to me.
Well, now we have to have a different sort of conversation. Because accidentally we've introduced a third contender for who could potentially win the belt. This crowd wants one thing and one thing only from the moment the show starts until the moment it ends, and it is Sid. Like, it doesn't even make sense. This is baby Sid. He's not even himself yet. But, I mean, the crowd is rabid for Sid.
Yeah, like, when he's just standing on the apron during that tag match, they chant, "We want Sid."
And he's a heel in the heel stable. He's not even that interesting yet.
How many times have we talked about Sid and just the magnetism of this man?
Academically, it doesn't make sense. There's no individual part of him that seems like it should produce this reaction from people. I mean, he's got terrible hair. He's very ugly.
But he's so big.
He's big, but he's not. He's in a match with Gigante. He's not that big.
He's tiny compared to Gigante. He's like, I don't know, 8 inches shorter or something like that.
He's exactly the same height as Barry Windham. which is funny.
And I love how heights in wrestling work.
Yeah, Barry Windham looks like a sad, out-of-shape Sid.
Barry Windham is, yeah, like, I always harp on, like, some guys who aren't as tall as you think, but also, like, I'm obsessed with guys who are way taller than you think. Barry Windham is huge. Barry Windham is like the size of The Undertaker.
Barry Windham's all of 6'7", like,
Yeah.
and it's just never mentioned.
No, he's not billed as a giant. He's not billed as a 7-footer. He's a huge dude.
Arn Anderson comes out with Barry Windham and Sid, and he looks like he's all of 3 feet tall. If Arn Anderson is 5'11", then I'm 7'2".
Yeah. Ole Anderson is too old to wrestle at this point, so he's pretty much become the manager. He's assumed the J.J. Dillon role in the Horsemen.
He's not especially good at it.
No.
This is a weird time for the Horsemen. The only thing that feels pure about it is Arn.
Yeah, Arn is as good as he ever was.
We'll eventually get to a much better pairing. It's funny because the Dangerous Alliance feels more like the Horsemen than the Horsemen ever do during this era.
And they don't even have Flair.
Yeah. Like, if you put Flair in that stable instead of Rick Rude, then it feels like the Horsemen.
It really is. It's amazing to think about. There was never really a good Horseman in my mind after the original. All the incarnations they go through, I can't name one I really liked.
Jeff Jarrett, Mongo, and Chris Benoit.
Paul Roma.
Ugh.
Yeah. You know, this one's good, but Sid is a weird fit, and I don't really like having Ole around either.
But, like, the idea is that Sid's going to turn babyface on them sooner than later.
Yeah, of course.
And then you have it. So, like, you should be aiming for Sid versus Sting at, like, next Starrcade.
No, but instead they do it at Halloween Havoc this year.
It's too soon.
Way too soon, and Sid loses.
And then he's done.
Yeah, no wonder he left for the WWF.
But yeah, that's the only guy who's on his way up. Unless you split in the Steiners and they won't let you, so fuck it. I don't know. Who's Sting supposed to wrestle?
We talk about, like, who else could have filled in. Like, you probably could have thrown Scott Steiner in the main event here. Like, there's definitely a way to do that, where they do, like, a battle royal or a tournament or something, and Scott surprises everybody and wins. I think it would have worked.
I still think you could have gotten some mileage out of, like, Sting versus Arn. They never really go there.
Yeah.
You could have gotten
a great match.
I think you could have heated up the Freebirds to, like, feud with Sting. Something like that.
The Sting's got the dudes with attitudes to back him up.
The dudes with attitudes.
Oh.
Here's this for a stable. I want you to imagine these 3 men standing next to each other. I want you to imagine them eating lunch at, like, an Arby's. El Gigante, Junkyard Dog, and old man Paul Orndorff.
Oh, Jesus. That's Sting's crew. That's who he's running with.
2 old fucks with nothing in common, and a gigantic man from Argentina who speaks barely any English. That's Sting's group.
Well, we'll get into who was supposed to be part of it in a second. They had a much better idea, but it didn't work out.
Yeah.
In May, at the infamous Capital Combat show, Luger and Flair have a rematch. Capital Combat is infamous because that's the one with RoboCop. How have we never done that?
That's one of my favorite reviews that I've ever done. Like, that show kicks ass.
We're going to have to cover that sometime.
Fuck yeah, I love that show.
RoboCop. They treat RoboCop like he's real.
The whole show's about RoboCop, and he's only on screen for like 20 seconds.
Yeah, what is it, the Horseman locks Sting in a cage?
And RoboCop lumbers down and rips off the door.
Yeah. I don't even think it was Peter Weller or whatever his name is.
No, do you know what else is on that card? I'm sorry to go off on this tangent, but we're talking about Mean Mark Calloway versus Johnny Ace. We're talking about Paul Ellering versus Teddy Long in a hair versus hair match.
The cage is there so Cornette can get locked in it, right?
Yeah, hell yeah.
He liked that.
Talking about the Rock and Roll Express versus the Freebirds in a corporal punishment match.
Corporal punishment match.
Which I think means spanking, doesn't it?
That's definitely like everybody has leather straps and they can whip each other.
We definitely can't call it a spanking match. Anyway, sorry to
It's
get off on that
almost it's
tangent.
almost like Jim Cornette was on the booking committee.
Yeah, but that show kicked so much ass.
Um, Main event: Luger and Flair in a cage match that ended in a disqualification after the Horsemen interfered to save Flair. Yes, a cage match ended in a disqualification.
Where the Horsemen interfere to help Flair?
I
What?
know. I'll never those dastardly horsemen. And JR and Bob Caudle sold it like it was the worst thing they've ever seen.
God, JR is so on one during this period of his career.
I love his indignance. Any cheating by the heels, he just loses his mind.
And any cheating by the baby faces is easily glossed over and on to the next segment.
Hypocrite.
Yep, the worst.
I was glad when they brought in Jesse, who'd call him out on that.
Yes. God, I don't mind Bob Caudle here, but how much do you wish this were Jesse?
I always wish Jesse was there.
Always. Always.
Shortly before Capital Combat, Ole Anderson was promoted to head booker and began to lead the booking committee. What do you make of Ole Anderson getting the book in 1990? This seems like a huge step backwards.
Ole Anderson had one gift, one truly amazing gift. And that gift was his ability to sell himself to other people as some sort of genius or some sort of talent. Ole Anderson was not a particularly good wrestler, not a particularly great draw, not a particularly good promo, and a goddamn horrible booker and executive.
What a miserable prick he was, too. Actually, I think he's
Just the worst.
talking about it in the past tense. I think he's still alive, but yeah, just there's nobody who has a story about like a time Ole was nice to them.
And like I guess he was like sleeping with somebody in the office, so he got like to get
Yes.
ahead politically, like that whole thing. Woof.
Ugh. It seems like they gave Ole more kind of authority than Flair had because he starts bringing in all of his buddies. Like, we'll see this show is just littered with friends of Ole.
And he starts like rebooking like his favorite hits from like the late 70s, early 80s NWA days.
Yeah, the
He just
ratings absolutely tank. They literally get cut in half over the next year.
This is not what people want to see. Is they don't want to see 1979 again in 1990.
Oh, Flair was, man, I thought Flair was doing a good job booking, and just Hurd just could not stand Ric Flair for whatever reason. Like, Ric Flair and Jim Hurd, just two very different people.
And the problem is that if you don't like Ric Flair, you're not going to like Ric Flair's booking because Ric Flair's booking is mostly revolves around Ric Flair.
Oh, which is great.
Especially since he's the only star you got, so that's what you should be doing.
Yeah. A few weeks prior to this, they had a Clash of the Champions. That was Clash of the Champions 11 Coastal Crush. Love that name.
Coastal Crush.
From, I believe, Charleston, South Carolina.
Hell yeah.
Very Jim Crockett town. That show was headlined by Flair defending the world title against the Junkyard Dog, which feels like it might have been Ole messing with Flair that he made him wrestle JYD.
I think it definitely was.
That ended in a DQ after interference from the Horsemen, if you can believe that.
Interesting.
Kerry Von Erich was rumored to be debuting for WCW on that show, but it doesn't happen. He ends up going to the WWF instead. I feel like he would have been a much better fit for Sting's stable than Paul Orndorff was.
That could have been a game changer for them. That could have been a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, Kerry ends up getting a decent push in the WWF. WCW could really use another big babyface here.
Oh, God, yes. Just anything. Like, because then you can turn Lex, because you don't have to worry about that. Sting's got a new best friend. No big deal.
Yeah, Paul Orndorff is a babyface. That's like a big onion in the middle of an ice cream bowl.
Like, the fact that he's even still working, like, he's not the same. Like, that goes without saying.
He's having the issues with his neck and his arm at this point.
He was washed when he was having the feud with Hogan in '85. He just worked through it because the money was so goddamn good.
Here we are 4 years later, and somehow he lasts until like '96. It's kind of crazy.
I mean, he's still going to be in good enough shape to beat
Yeah.
Vader's ass with his shower shoes on. So
Yeah, so I guess we shouldn't dog the old man too much.
yep.
So Sting is now healthy. He's ready to challenge Flair for the title. It's his crowning moment. WCW has been building to this for years. They finally got their new top star to replace Flair. All they've got to do is make him, and we'll see how they do tonight.
Good luck.
So to get into the show, it's July 7th, 1990. We're at the Baltimore Arena in Baltimore, Maryland. Crowd of about 10,000 on hand, about 9,000 paid. It's not a sellout in the Baltimore Arena. Gate of $153,000. Not terrible if you're grading on the curve for early 90s WCW.
It's okay. There's clearly interest in this main event. I think that's what that definitively proves.
And the buy rate is a pretty strong 1.75 for a little over 200,000 buys. That's way up from 140,000 the previous year. And if you'll remember, the previous year was one of the best like WCW pay-per-views of all time. That Great American Bash '89 show with like Flair versus Funk, Sting versus Muta, Luger versus Steamboat. It was a loaded card, and they could barely draw flies.
Yep. Unfortunately, they just didn't have the juice anymore.
But no, I mean, this is clear. There's interest in Sting, is what we can say here. Like, people are buying Sting.
They're making the right decision. They know that. That's as confirmed as it can possibly be.
In the dark match, David Sierra, a.k.a. the Cuban Assassin, a.k.a. the Terrorist, defeated Mr. X, who is Jerry Valiant under a mask. I assume this was just a tryout match to see if he had anything in the tank, and I think it turned out he didn't.
And that's the thing. Like, imagine with all the old timers we're going to talk about, like the guys who had to get tryout matches and still didn't pass.
Yeah. That's
how bad they had to be.
And that went about 11 minutes, so that definitely feels like they were testing him, and he did not pass. Yeah. We get a quick opening, which is like Revolutionary War style portraits of the wrestlers on the show tonight. I dug this.
I dug it. I didn't really get that as like the theme of this, but it was definitely, again, it was definitely an interesting theme for the show that like WCW was doing a lot better than WWE at the time.
And then we go to Jim Ross and Bob Caudle to welcome us to the show. Opening match, we've got the Nature Boy, Buddy Landel, against Brian Pillman. Landel, kind of crazy letting him use the Nature Boy gimmick while Flair is there, but this is building to a program between them. I think a couple months after this, they were supposed to shoot the angle to set that up, and Buddy Landel overslept and didn't show up for the TV taping. Story of that guy's career.
That is incredibly amazing.
Just somebody, like, they got him on the phone at the hotel and were like, "Hey, buddy, are you coming to TV?" He was like, "No, I'm not coming today." I'm pretty sure he had a drug problem. Like, the guy ended up dying very young.
Yes, I would have to imagine so. It is just super weird, though, because there's a reason he's running the Nature Boy thing, is that he looks like Ric Flair from the wide shot. And then you see him in
Ric Flair with a beer gut.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's you. But like that's such great cheap heat that like the crowd is like, oh, is that Rick? Oh, it's just Buddy.
Yeah. Pillman hasn't been around long, but him and Tom Zenk have already been U.S. Tag Team Champions, and you can kind of see he's a star on the rise already here.
Oh, big time. Like, the crowd responds to him huge. He probably gets like the third biggest pop of the night after, well, the fourth biggest, because Luger gets a pretty big one too. But after Sting and after Sid, like, it's definitely Brian.
Landel is the larger of the two men. He uses his size to wear Pillman down. Pillman fires up, makes his comeback. hits a flying crossbody from the top to get the pin. I think that went about 8 minutes. It's kind of a basic match, but I thought this accomplished what it needed to. Just give Pillman a solid win on pay-per-view to start the show.
My thing is, Pillman's on so many of these shows, I feel like he's never really getting good wins. Like, they must be so caught up in his size.
Ole did not buy Brian Pillman because he was only 5'11", which is just, how could you look at that guy and not think he was a star? The way he moved, the way he looked.
The way people reacted to him. Like, he was something special, something different. Obviously, nobody there could see the future that was coming, that light heavyweights were going to be the future, basically. But he could have spearheaded that charge, and in a way he did by accident.
Next match, we've got the Iron Sheik against Mike Rotunda. Yes, Iron Sheik in 1990.
The Iron Sheik, there's only one thing about this match I want to say, and that is that at one point, and this isn't a fat-shaming podcast, guys, we're inclusive. We don't want to make people, we don't want to hurt any feelings. Sheik is still alive and with us today, I believe.
Yeah.
And he deserves better than that. But at one point, Sheik does try to lock on an abdominal stretch onto Mike Rotunda, and he can't do it because his gut is in the way, and the look of frustration and anger on his face as he tries to fight his own body to make this happen. It's such a bummer, guys.
He's so heavy here. Looks like he weighs 300 pounds.
It's not good.
No. He's 48 here. Like, he's actually old. Like, he was an older guy when he got into the business, and he is well past his prime at this point.
Absolutely.
The story I've heard is they brought him in '89. He was horrible, so they sent him home, and then they forgot to fire him, so his contract automatically rolled over, so they were stuck with him for another year. So they brought him back to do some jobs. But then the matches were so bad, they just ended up sending him home again.
They forgot to fire him.
It happened a lot in WCW.
I just love the idea of, like, somebody looking at the calendar at, like, 4:50 on a Friday and being like, oh, shit, we forgot to fire the Sheik.
Yeah.
Shit. Somebody call him.
Sheik is just sitting there looking at his phone, realizing his contract is about to roll over, and he's going to get another $100,000 if they don't call him to fire him.
Just seeing him sipping on a Bud Light, seeing WCW like their number pop up on his phone and being like, not today.
Oh, fuck the WCW. We should mention Rotunda is Captain Mike Rotunda here. His gimmick is that he likes to sail, I guess. I don't understand it. Like, I'm not the biggest Mike Rotunda fan, but, like, Varsity Club Mike Rotunda was a good gimmick.
This is foul. Like, Mike Rotunda could not look like a bigger asshole than he does here.
Yeah. Rotunda gets Sheik with a backslide to win an absolutely miserable match.
It's just the worst. It sucks. There's no other way to put it.
Then Gordon Soley gets a word with Harley Race about his upcoming match against Tommy Rich, which would be really hot 10 years before this, but it's 1990 and nobody wants to see either of these guys wrestle anymore.
The best part is, assumedly, Ole Anderson told Harley, like, hey, Harley, good to have you here. You're going to wrestle Tommy Rich. I'm going to give you 1 minute to rebuild your feud from 1982. And go.
Yeah.
And also, you got to put over that Sting's going to win the belt. Go.
Yeah. Harley looking real rough here. I always forget he came back and wrestled after his WWF run.
Thank goodness he's going to be a manager soon, because he should not be in the ring.
No, he jacked his neck up real bad, doing that headbutt on the table against Hogan.
Yep.
Next match, we've got Dutch Mantel against Doug Furnas. Two guys I don't associate with WCW for this era. I'm kind of fascinated by Doug Furnas. This guy is an incredible athlete, like great football player, junior college All-American, played at Tennessee, one of the strongest men in the world at the time. He could squat nearly 1,000 pounds and bench press nearly 600 pounds. That's despite two major disadvantages that he had. One, he was taller than most powerlifters. He's about 5'11". Powerlifters are usually short guys. They're like 5'8", because it means they have less, they don't have to do as much work to move the bar. They have shorter arms, shorter legs. It's easier to do the squats and the other lifts. He's too tall. Also, he's allergic to chalk, so he can't chalk up his hands to get the best grip on the bar.
So he's got to just be tearing up his hands every time he lifts something heavy.
Oh, my God, yeah.
That's fucking... I never knew that about him. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think of the meager amounts of weight I lift and how sometimes I'm like, oh, that really hurt my hands when I'm, I don't know, bench pressing 150 pounds or something like that.
Yikes. And he looks inhuman.
He's so big.
It doesn't even make sense.
And then he breaks out a beautiful, picture-perfect, like, Randy Orton-style drop kick.
He even kind of like turns it into like a drop salt, like Paul London used to do. Like he could have moonsaulted out of that thing.
Yeah.
Like he's like he does a backflip off the top rope as a transition.
For contrast, Dutch Mantel looks disgusting.
That's why he's Dirty Dutch, baby.
Oh my God, his back hair is so gross.
Like, A-Train's calling card was his nasty back hair, and I have my share of back hair, like we all have our flaws. Dutch Mantel's back hair looks like he slathers it in Crisco for that nice greasy sheen.
You can like barely tell where his long greasy black hair on his head ends and where his back hair begins.
Literally, Jim Ross and Bob Caudle can't even keep it together while they're talking about it without bursting into laughter.
Oh my God.
But that's his gimmick. He's a nasty, dirty man, and he would go down to Puerto Rico and just be gross.
You just know that singlet smelled disgusting, and he probably didn't wash it.
And the best part was, a lot of the time he was wrestling, he was the booker in the territories he was wrestling in. So he just book himself with you and be like, guess what? You're doing a job to the dirty tights tonight.
Furnace does leapfrogs and easily clears Dutch. Like, not even close.
Like, at one point, like, Dutch, like, pulls up, and he just does, like a ballet plie, where he just, like, kind of flips his feet in the air, just, like, splits in the air, like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Settle down.
He hits a huge press slam where he holds Dutch up for a solid 30 seconds.
Dutch is not a small man.
No!
And he's not an easy-to-lift man either, because at this point, he's like a sack of just ribs and beer.
Furnace breaks out a backflip and a beautiful drop kick.
It's insane what he's doing here.
Yeah. Furnace misses a knee drop. Dutch takes advantage. JR says that's a good camera shot. As the camera zooms, I swear, like halfway up Dutch's asshole.
It sure does.
Oh, yeah, that's a good camera shot.
I just love when Jim Ross just takes a moment out of his busy day of calling the action and giving you the emotional resonance that carries you to the show to openly criticize his coworkers. Like, hey, cameraman, you fucking suck. Please don't show me the inside of his ass crack.
Huge belly-to-belly suplex from Furnace, and he gets the win. Doug Furnace looked like a star here.
He does. And all of a sudden, it's becoming evident that, like, not that WCW doesn't have the talent. Like, there seem to be potential, like, mega baby faces, like, exploding from every corner of this roster. None of them make it, though. Like, what happens?
Well, this is where we get into WCW's Japan problem.
Yes, that's true.
Is they can't compete with Japan. Like, Doug Furnace goes to Japan because the money's better. He ends up forming that team with Phil LaFon. They do great for themselves over there. Bam Bam Bigelow I think wrestled on that Clash of the Champions, the Coastal Crush, but can't keep him. Too much money he's making in Japan. WCW can't compete with that. Stan Hansen, Steve Williams, Vader. Like, these are a bunch of guys who could be stars for this company, but they can't afford them because these guys are making way too much money over in Japan.
Yeah, it must be said that during the early 90s when WWF and WCW, we think of this as being like the doldrums, the worst part in wrestling. American wrestling is on its ass and there's a chance it might never recover. But meanwhile in Japan, the period from like 1990 to 1995 is maybe the most lucrative in Japanese wrestling history. It's exploding. And it's not a coincidence that there aren't any stars left in America, because a lot of the good, hot, young talent and a lot of the bigger stars who are still in their prime and get away go to Japan because the money's incredible. In fact, that becomes like people's plans. Scott Hall even asked Vince, like, hey, I'll keep working for you. Can I just go to like Japan like twice a year just so I can get an actual paycheck? Is that cool?
Yeah. Gordon Soley interviews Jim Cornette. His team, the Midnight Express, will defend their U.S. tag titles against the Southern Boys tonight.
Them Southern Boys.
And then we get the eagerly anticipated Harley Race versus Tommy Rich. Would have been a huge match 10 years before this. It was, of course, 9 years before this. Tommy Rich defeated Harley Race to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. I would have thought Tommy Rich was like 45 here. He's actually 33.
Yeah, Tommy Rich looks like your grandpa here. Like, I've never seen a person look more done in my entire life, and he's 34.
He's practically a kid. Like, in modern wrestling, he'd be like a plucky young guy.
Yeah, I think Ricochet debuted in WWE older than that. Like, that's where we're at.
Yeah. Race is 47 and looks 60.
But he always did, didn't he?
Yeah. No, but he looks bad here. He's got the huge beer gut. He's wrestling in a singlet. He's broken down. It's not pretty.
This is just a sad 6 minutes of our lives.
Yeah. Like, so clear that Ole is just booking his friends. Like, Ole and Harley go back. Tommy Rich made a ton of money for Ole and for Jim Barnett back in Georgia. Like, just booking their friends, even if there's no way these guys are going to get over anymore.
I mean, eventually Harley will like turn into a manager and he'll do good work with Vader. It's just none of these guys belong in the ring anymore. They just don't. Like, the 80s feel like it's 1990, but somehow the 80s feel like they're already 30 years ago.
Race ends up getting the win after he rolls through a crossbody and grabs the tights. Bad match. Just
bad match.
Then Gordon Soley interviews Paulie Dangerously and his protege, Mean Mark Callis. Yes, The Undertaker in WCW.
I'm so happy that recently we got a chance to talk about his retirement so that we could now go back here, and because we honored him and we praised him and we talked about how much we loved him. So now we can go back here and talk about what a fucking goofball he looks like.
Terrible mullet.
This whole thing where he's like a cowboy, sorta, but he's just... His character is that he's mean. That's his character.
Yeah, they have no idea what this gimmick is. He's big. Like, the thing is, like, they got some inclination that, like, maybe he should be some kind of dark character, because, like, JR will throw in on commentary that he's a big fan of Ozzy Osbourne's music, so, like, I think they have some inclination, like, oh, maybe we should give him kind of a dark character. Well, no, they missed the boat on that. Ole hated him. Ole thought he was a big, like, awkward goof he'd never get over. Ole was a curmudgeonly asshole.
And it's just one of the more delightful things is that we like burying people on this show. Like, we have a buried list. Yeah. Ole Anderson's on it. But we don't have to bury him this time. He buried himself.
Yeah. The number of guys on this show who are obvious stars that he just hated for whatever, just because it seems like I don't think he liked any of the new wrestlers. I think he was
No.
just one of those guys who couldn't like modern wrestling. He just wasn't what he grew up doing. So like he would never like the new stuff. You can't have somebody like that booking your show.
And like Bill Watts struggled against his nature because Bill Watts was one of those guys too. Bill Watts tried to push new guys. He just couldn't. He just couldn't fight against his nature to hate them. But Ole didn't even try.
No, he just buries
fuck
all of them.
These guys.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to get to a match pretty soon where he brings in a guy for one night, and buries one of his potential rising stars.
Yeah, but that guy deserved it.
Yeah, well, it was fucking cool. But, like, I'm just saying.
Next up, for the U.S. tag titles, we've got the Midnight Express against the Wild-Eyed Southern Boys. That's Tracy Smothers and Steve Armstrong, and they're basically walking Confederate flags.
I mean, they're not basically walking Confederate flags. They come to the ring dressed as Confederate soldiers with Confederate flags on their tights.
This doesn't age well.
I mean, it wasn't good then.
1990. This is the thing that's amazing, is Turner Broadcasting, famously, like, politically correct, like, didn't want to say foreign object, had all these rules, apparently has no problem with guys coming out dressed as Confederate soldiers.
I mean, I don't really know what Ted Turner's politics along those lines are. I mean, he was based in Atlanta for most of his life, so he might be a Southern pride kind of guy. I don't know. But what I do know is that if Hank Aaron had walked by the Southern Boys on his way to lunch in the TBS Towers, they would have been unemployed the next day.
Lots of cheers for the Midnights here.
And they deserve it. They're cool, and the Southern Boys are not.
Cornette yells at a fan to shut your mouth, you pig-faced moron.
So good. Like, Jim Cornette is a horrible person. Like, I'm actually happy that we can just cut to the chase now that we have actual evidence that he's a terrible person. We can just cut straight to the chase and ignore the parts where we're like, well, he seems like kind of... No, he's a terrible person. But what he is good at is managing. Goddamn, he's good at managing.
Man, can he get heat.
But goddamn, does he get heat in real life, too, because of what a dickhead he is.
Yeah. Armstrong hits a flying crossbody and then a nice kick. Cornette yells at the referee that karate isn't legal in wrestling.
I wonder if there's some rule on the books about that.
You're not supposed to kick with the point of your boot.
Yeah.
You kick with the sole or the heel. But just yeah, like not the point.
That's just like you're not supposed to punch with a closed fist.
Yeah. It's nobody ever gets disqualified for this. But yeah.
It wouldn't have surprised me in WCW. A promotion where you can get disqualified for anything, anytime. Sometimes they don't even explain why.
Lane gets the better of a karate. That's the other irony, is like both the Midnight Express guys threw super kicks.
Yes.
It's ironic on two levels. One, that like karate's not supposed to be legal in wrestling. Cornette's complaining about that, but both his guys throw, savate kicks. But also Cornette, who will, of course, famously hate the Young Bucks for throwing too many super kicks. A lot of super kicks in these Midnight Express matches, I notice.
There sure are.
Don't really beat anybody with them, as far as I can tell.
No. The Midnight Express only beat people with dickish roll-ups. That's their gimmick.
Lane runs Smothers into the guardrail while the crowd has his back turned. Crowd cheers that, but they do boo a racket shot from Cornette.
They still hate Cornette, but they love the Midnights.
Eaton hits the Alabama Jam, but he's too hurt to cover. He tags out to Lane. Smothers manages to sunset flip both Eaton and Lane, and then rolls to make the hot tag to Armstrong. I do love when guys roll into the hot tag.
Yeah,
we should bring that back.
Just to get that momentum, and they do that like flying jump across the ring.
To think of it, I feel like I've seen Cody do that.
Yeah, I think he does it like every time. Yeah.
We know what he grew up watching.
Yes, we do.
The Southern Boys hit a drop kick spinebuster combo. The ref won't count because Smothers is in the ring. Just get out of the ring, you dumbass.
He just stands there.
Yeah.
Because he knows that that's his role, is that the ref has to catch him. But he's literally just there. And then the referee admonishes him, and he just keeps standing there.
Armstrong goes to the top, and he gets thrown off. The Midnights hit the rocket launcher, but Armstrong kicks out at 2. Smothers catches Eaton in a small package, but Lane breaks it up. Lane then gets a small package and gets the pin. Really dug that. That was a really good match.
It was a good match. I wish I didn't get into the Southern Boys at all, and that's as much as I can separate it from what it is that they are and represent. They just were a very generic babyface tag team, but the
Thankfully,
Midnights
there
are so fun.
Monuments to these guys, but if there were, I would wish an angry mob would tear them down.
I would love to be part of that mob, but the Midnight Express are just so goddamn good. Can we talk about the tag division in this company?
Loaded.
It's literally like a list of the greatest teams of all time. It's crazy.
So you got the Steiners, the Road Warriors, the Freebirds, various incarnations of the Horsemen. They were supposed to have Arn and Tully, but Turner wouldn't let him bring Tully back.
The Rock and Rolls, the Midnights, any sort of like random addition you want to make to that, including the Wild Samoans.
The Southern Boys aren't a bad team.
For that to be like your jobber team is incredible.
Yeah, that's like the 6th best team on this roster. Then you look over at the WWF, and they've got like the Hart Foundation, Demolition, the Nasty Boys. I guess the Bulldogs are gone by this point. But yeah, this is the best time there ever was for tag team wrestling.
Yeah. As much as I'm bagging on the Southern Boys, they're about exactly the same as the Smoking Guns. And at least they're not the best team in the division.
Then Gordon Soley interviews Michael Hayes and Jimmy Jam Garvin. They are both looking especially glam tonight.
Yes, they've decided to do their makeup and like slash their eyebrows out super good. And it's actually like Garvin clearly just applied some like random makeup to his face. Michael Hayes made an effort. I got to give him some props for that. Like Michael Hayes sat in front of a makeup mirror and was like, I'm going to look fucking fabulous tonight and we're doing this.
Well, Terry may have been the makeup girl by this point, so that may have been why he was spending so much time in the makeup chair.
He just looked really good. Like, the pink really brought out the accent in his eyes. I really liked it.
Next, we get probably my favorite part of the show, as Big Van Vader makes his WCW debut against Tom Zenk. This is going to go extremely poorly for Tom Zenk.
This is, when I first saw Tom Zenk, because Tom Zenk's on every show from this era. Yeah. So we've covered him a million times, and it's always like a pretty good match, right? He's always like involved with like Brian Pillman or somebody like that. So I was like, oh, cool. What's this Tom Zenk match? And then Vader comes out.
Oh, my God. Tom Zenk is going to get his fucking ass kicked here. Think of all the old dudes we have gone through who were on this show. This wouldn't have been a great spot for Tommy Rich to do a job.
Or for, like, Sheik to just fall over and have a heart attack and die.
Oh, Vader would have killed Sheik. He would have broken his back.
But yeah, so clearly Ole Anderson doesn't think much of Tom Zenk. But the lights come down a little bit, and Vader walks out. And he looks like Godzilla.
Yeah.
With this, like, crazy metal contraption on his head.
That thing is so cool. It's like a giant mask that covers half his body, and it's like a giant elephant man.
It makes him look like a cyborg. It's incredible. And then he sets it down, and steam erupts from it.
He sets it down. They've got that ramp that like is connected to the ring, so the ramp's the same height as the ring. So he puts the thing down, and then he poses and plays to the crowd, and they go wild. Crowd is all into Vader here, and yeah, steam shoots out of the top of the mask.
I still don't understand how that happens. I assume that when he takes it off, he like hits a button, and that like starts like a teapot effect or something. Yeah. I don't understand it, but it's sick.
Yeah, I mean, if you've only ever seen Vader in the WWF, and you just kind of remember him as, like, the fat piece of shit who got beat up all the time, like, you need to see WCW Vader. This is the man.
The closest comparison I can draw to WCW Vader is like Ring of Honor Samoa Joe, where like he was just too fast for it even to make sense. Like he made a mockery of the monsters who had come before him.
Vader just absolutely dominates. Not one offensive move for Zenk here.
Vader doesn't even beat him with one of his finishes. He just splashes him and ends it.
2.5 minutes. Ole Anderson says, "Fuck you, Z-Man."
I almost wish like we could know that like Zenk didn't even know he was facing Vader. He's like, well, don't know who I'm facing tonight. Let's see what's gonna be. Oh.
Vader did not stiff him nearly as much as he could have. Like he didn't hit the power bomb. Like he could have really gone in on him, and he didn't.
Though I do have to say that splash that he hits, mostly when people do splashes, like big guys, they like brace with their hands, so they hit with their hands first, and they hit their hips on the mat. So basically, they barely make contact. Not Vader.
That was a stiff one.
Vader flings his 300-pound ass into the sun and brings it down on you.
Great debut for Vader. Amazingly, this is kind of just a one-off. He doesn't wrestle another pay-per-view match in WCW until Wrestle War the next May. And then that ends up being kind of a one-off, and then he finally comes back full-time in 1992.
How crazy is that?
How did they let this man leave the arena without a contract?
It doesn't matter how much money he wants, because you're building Sting. You just made Sting. You need an opponent for Sting.
Yeah.
Here he is, man.
Yeah. This is the man right here.
And like, you can't get him for a year. You can't throw him like $300,000 just to sit his ass down for 6 matches.
How much do you think they were paying Dutch Mantel, Harley Race, Tommy Rich, Sheik combined?
Yeah, fire all of them and give it all to Vader.
God. Gordon Soley interviews Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, Barry Windham, and Sid Vicious. That's 4/5 of the Four Horsemen minus Ric Flair.
Gosh, that's a weird 4 horsemen.
Yeah. Ole Anderson.
Ole!
With his black shirt, his black trousers, and his black suspenders.
And he just looks like You know how in your friend group when you were a kid, there was that one really mean dad, and no one wanted to hang out at that house?
Yeah.
That's Ole Anderson.
Yeah. If you did one thing wrong, he was going to fucking smack you across the room.
Exactly.
Yeah. Don't mess with Ole Anderson.
But like WCW was like his house. So you could come in and visit, but it wasn't for you to have fun. It was for Ole to have fun.
Jesus. Next up, we've got the Fabulous Freebirds against the Steiner Brothers. Freebirds just tear it up with their entrance here.
Even now, when they are doing music, and it's not just the Freebirds, like, Bad Street USA is still so far and away the best thing on this show. It's crazy. Nobody else is even close. They just haven't figured it out like this yet.
You can, like, barely even hear anybody else's music. It's so generic.
But the moment Bad Street USA hits, the fans are on their feet.
Yeah. Freebirds with just an enormous amount of stalling here. Like, they barely get in the ring for 5 minutes.
I kind of love it, though.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a fucking chance.
No chance against the Steiner Brothers. Jesus.
Like, and these are the...
They don't even have Bam Bam. Bam Bam's too busy working in Japan.
And, like, the Freebirds at this point are not the Freebirds who were in World Class that we talked about, who were, like, fighting wars against the Von Erichs. These are the older Freebirds, and they're like, we get by on trickery and the DDT. Like, we're not a real team anymore.
But Buddy Roberts is retired. Jimmy Jam Garvin has replaced him.
Yes. So, like, it's not the same anymore. So they're here to do a high-profile job.
Scott catches Hayes on a backdrop attempt and hits him with a power bomb, and then he hits a tilt-a-whirl slam on Garvin.
I could watch young Scott Steiner do power moves to people for a million hours.
The thing is, like, it seems like intentionally do these moves in the hardest way, where he'll, like, start to get them up and then stop so they have no momentum and then just deadlift them.
Just to see if he can do it.
Yeah.
Like, that's what a game this is for them.
This is a guy who T-Bone suplexed the Giant a couple of years after this when they wrestled on Nitro.
And it wasn't even hard for him.
No, he just tossed him across the ring.
And you want to hear something funny? He's not the strong one. Rick Steiner.
Everybody was scared of Rick.
Yeah.
Everybody would rather be in there with Scott. Like, yeah, Scott might get mad at you and beat you up, but, like, Rick would stiff you just for fun. Like, nobody wants to get hit with that Rick Steiner clothesline.
My favorite Rick Steiner story is the one where he's in a battle royal with DDP, and DDP's wearing, like, 25 pairs of tights because he heard that they're going to strip him naked in the ring. And Rick Steiner just grabs 20 pairs of tights. And, like, tights are made not to budge. And he rips them off of DDP's body at the same time. Can you imagine the strength that requires? And they explode, and his pants, like, fly into the third row.
There's a contingent of fans in the front row chanting, "Michael is a bitch."
Yeah, it's like 4 dudes, but they're very loud.
4 strong.
They're, like, really committed to it.
Scott hits a Frankensteiner behind the ref's back, but Hayes sneaks in and hits him with a DDT. Garvin makes the cover. The ref won't count because Garvin's not legal. Rick then sneaks in and hits a belly-to-belly suplex on Hayes and rolls Scott on top for a pin. I like every Steiner Brothers match from this era.
I might like every Steiner Brothers match.
Yeah.
Even the ones that shouldn't be good, even the ones that are a little bit boring, it's still just, it never got old. Ever.
Yeah, just love watching them chuck guys around.
It's just a delirious fever dream. Every match is a squash match when the Steiners are in the ring. And I love me a squash match.
Next up, we've got the 4 Horsemen against the Dudes with Attitudes.
The Dudes with Attitudes.
It's Arn Anderson, Barry Windham, and Sid against El Gigante, Paul Orndorff, and Junkyard Dog.
Yay.
I'm sure those 3 guys hang out together. I don't think Arn, Barry, and Sid probably hung out together either, to be honest.
Well, you know, Arn and Sid weren't the best of friends.
They did have their issues in later years, that's right.
And Barry Windham basically is just forgotten in all of this. Like, 4 years ago, Barry Windham was a big name. At this point, Barry Windham's just a guy. Here's the thing about this match, though. Like, I don't know who you would think was getting pushed here based on the names that were just read. This match is all about Gigante.
Yeah.
Like, Sid is not even in their frame of mind to start pushing yet. It's not until the fans force their hand that they push him way before they should. And everybody else is basically just an old-timer whiling out the days before they retire. This is all about pushing El Gigante to the moon. And it kind of works.
So, backstory on El Gigante. He is born in Argentina. He is, he has whatever the, biological condition is that he never stops growing, like Andre had, like Big Show had. The Big Show got it corrected because they had figured out how to do it by the time he came around. So he is 6'4" when he's 14, and might actually be 7'5" or 7'7". Like, he is amazingly tall. One of the tallest people to ever play basketball.
And it's so strange to see someone be, like, proportionate. Like, obviously, Andre's had a lot of troubles later in life because, like, his body just wasn't built to, like, withstand the amount of weight that it was carrying. But like El Gigante's in great shape.
Yeah.
Like regardless of how big he is, he's pretty slim, but he's not like absolutely skinny. He's not like Manute Bol out there. He's just, he's looking good. Like he's got himself a fresh mullet for the 90s.
Yeah, the haircut of the 90s.
He's got like a big, goofy, endearing smile. Like there's a charisma about him that obviously doesn't translate anytime he tries to talk or wrestle. But I don't know. There's a moment when they're walking to the ring where like he goes to get in the ring and Junkyard Dog tries to get in and he's like, "Oh no, you go, Dog. You're the best, Dog. Get in there."
Yeah.
It's just sweet. I like him.
He has a charm to him.
Yeah.
So he was a basketball player who was picked by the Atlanta Hawks. Was not physically up to playing in the NBA. There was no way his knees were going to be able to take that pound in.
No, you just can't do that. Like there are some people who have managed to make a career out of it, but their knees are always shredded by the time they get to the end.
Yeah. So Ted Turner owns the Hawks and he owns WCW. So he's got this guy. He's like, well, why can't he wrestle? So they send him over to WCW. He gets a couple months of training, and now they've just thrown him on TV. He debuted in May at Capital Combat.
And here's the thing. He sucks in the ring.
Yeah.
That's like not even the right amount of emphasis to put on that. He's not able to perform a wrestling maneuver. It's just, and he never learns how. But to be honest, I don't really care. Like, he's such a spectacle, and he's so charming that, I think, I don't understand how you don't find a place for him in your company,
It just didn't work. Just could not wrestle.
You can't teach him one move, and you can't teach him one body slam, and then he just beats everyone forever.
Yeah, of course, we'll later see him in the WWF as Giant Gonzalez. And it's amazing how much he seems to have aged by then.
That is true. And, we don't really know what his health is like at this point. It's
not good. He was diabetic. He died at 44. He's, young here. He's only 24. He died in the early 2000s.
Yeah, he looks better than Andre, but he's not going to do much better than Andre did.
So this match, Gigante never gets to tag in because he can't wrestle. But the whole point is the Horsemen are terrified of Gigante. At one point, Gigante winds up to throw a punch at Arn, and Arn just pratfalls all the way across the ring.
And the bug-eyed look on his face afterwards is just such a masterclass in selling.
But the whole crowd is chanting for Sid.
The entire time. This is not a joke. I know that we're not the most impartial observers when it comes to Sid. Please understand. This crowd is thirsty for Sid.
It's the exact same thing as the Great American Bash the year before this, when it was him and who was he teaming with at that point? I can't remember if it was Spivey or Undertaker at that point as the Twin Towers, but the crowd was chanting for him their entire match.
It does not matter whether you make Sid a heel or a face.
No.
It does not matter what you have Sid do or who you have him face. For some reason, this weird motherfucker with the blonde perm mullet captures the imagination of people every time he's on screen.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
6'7" and built like a Greek god.
But there's other guys like that who don't do this.
Sid has this magnetic intensity to him.
You just feel like you're about to watch a man snap right in front of your eyes. Orndorff
gets thrown over the top rope and the Horsemen get disqualified. Gigante never got to tag into the match. This match was very bad.
Yes, it was very, very bad. They did the best they could. That wasn't much.
No. Solely interviews Lex Luger, who says that Sting will win the world title tonight. And next up, we've got Luger's U.S. Championship defense against Mean Mark. We get some fun Luger facts from JR and Caudle. They say he graduated college with a degree in marketing and a 3.78 GPA, and he turned down an appointment to the Naval Academy. I'm actually not sure he graduated from Miami. I thought he left school after he got kicked off the football team.
I thought that was true.
His hotel room. Like, I know he got kicked off the team for trashing his hotel room. That happened. And I thought he just went and played Canadian football after that when he was like 19 or 20 or something like that.
He may have done like a correspondence course to finish his degree or something. It's hard to
maybe.
say. But also, can you think of 3 less impressive facts to say about someone to put over like how intelligent they are? Like, hey, he got a 3.78 GPA. First of all, GPAs don't mean shit. Second of all, that's not the best GPA you can get.
From Miami.
From Miami. He got a marketing degree.
Well, the better one is when JR says that Undertaker has a degree in sports management from Texas Western.
Like, I know that.
What are you doing, JR?
Jim Ross is obsessed with people's collegiate careers. He's obsessed with it.
He's a at some point college football fan. I am too, but like in a lot of cases, I think it kind of ruins the mystique of Mean Mark that he has a sports management degree from Texas Western.
What a burial of him that is. Like, yeah, a fun fact about Mean Mark is that he didn't get a good degree and went to a shitty university.
Oh, did you know he has a degree in hospitality management from Western Michigan University?
Like, the only way I could think to bury them more was to give them my actual things. Like, hey, did you know he went to school and almost got 3 different associate's degrees in film, Shakespeare, and sociology? What a failure.
God, yeah, I just... I don't know. There's a time and a place for this kind of thing. Mean Mark doesn't feel like the character for this.
No! Mean Mark came out of the deserts of Texas, beating up old women for their money.
Maybe, I mean, you could make up some backstory that, like, he played football at Texas Western, but he got kicked off the team because he got in too many fights with his teammates or something.
That is literally all you have to do.
Yeah.
What you should not do is tell us that he completed his... For 4 years, he went to school with the intention of getting a sports management degree.
God. Now I just want to look up like what every wrestler's college major was. What did Steve Austin major in when he was playing football at... I don't remember. Did he play at North Texas?
Culinary arts.
Culinary arts.
Latin American history. I don't know. I would love to find out.
Unbelievably, this is Taker's last WCW pay-per-view match. His contract runs out later in the summer. He's putting out feelers to the WWF already at this point because he can see he's never going to get a push in WCW. It's just crazy to me that WCW had The Undertaker, Steve Austin, Mick Foley, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Triple H, and they let them all go.
They saw nothing in any of them.
Yeah.
It's not just that they let them go. They were like, this is worthless shit that we just need to get rid of. Like, it has no purpose here. It's not like they like fought to get out. These were like the Christians of WCW during this period.
Most of the biggest stars of the 90s, and they just pass on them.
Everybody but The Rock, basically.
Yeah.
Dustin Rhodes, everybody.
In terms of like the Shawn Michaels, the other one.
Yeah.
They probably I'm sure they could have had, sure Crockett could have gotten the Rockers. They got their asses run out of the WWF. They needed somewhere to work.
Yeah, they got
I
lucky that they
assume
held
they
on.
just didn't want him because they already had the Rock and Roll Express.
Yes, exactly, and that's why the AWA took them in the first place, because they did not have the Rock and Roll Express. But even so, I mean, they could have had. Well, I don't think they could have had Brett. The dungeon was pretty much a
No,
pipeline to WWE.
they did almost get him in '92.
Oh, that's right, they did.
Almost bailed with the Intercontinental title.
Oh my God, imagine that shit.
Yeah, funny how Brett never talks about that when he, talks about why Vince was suspicious that he was going to leave with the title.
Oh my God, Brett versus Sting over who has the better sharpshooter.
Yeah.
We almost had it.
Mean Mark controls most of the match. He keeps hitting big right hands with his glove-covered hand, which leads Ross to speculate that it's a loaded glove. Luger gets him up in the torture rack, but the ref gets bumped. Heyman hits a shot with his cell phone, but Luger kicks out when the ref wakes up. Mean Mark sets up for the heart punch, but Luger ducks it. He then hits a clothesline and gets the pin. I think Taker was working with a pretty bad hip injury here, which limited what he could do. We don't get to see him break out the rope walk elbow that he would do.
Yeah, he didn't really seem like himself pretty much the whole time here.
But still, yeah, he's young, he's raw, but how can you not look at a guy who's 6'7" and moves like this guy can and see potential?
Nothing about athletes interested Ole Anderson.
Now, I think that's one thing we can see here. Just no interest in real athleticism.
Nope. Toughness. No. That's all that matters.
Yeah, in his day, wrestlers were hairy guys with beer guts. That's what he's looking for.
Yup.
We see pre-recorded comments from Sting on his match tonight. He says he's got friends in his corner tonight backing him up, so if he loses, he'll have no excuses. And then for the NWA World Tag Team Championship, we've got Doom defending against the Rock and Roll Express. Doom has gotten a significant upgrade since we last saw them at Starrcade. At Starrcade, they were two nameless jabronis in masks who didn't win a single match in the tournament.
Well, yes, that was under the control of Nancy.
Yes.
Or woman. Now they're under the control of Teddy Long, and they're coming out to Living in America by James Brown. And all of a sudden, they got that swagger.
So at Clash of the Champions Texas Shootout, they lost to the Steiner brothers and were forced to unmask as a result. And then they shocked the world and beat the Steiners to win the tag titles at Capital Combat. Gibson gets in some early shots on Reed. Then they do some double team moves. Reed and Simmons bail to the floor. Doom gets the advantage, and it's actually Gibson taking the heat for once. That was unique.
Yeah, I like that.
Doesn't last long because he's able to tag out to Morton, and then Ricky gets his ass kicked.
That's basically the rest of the match. Just.
JR says clotheslines have been a popular maneuver tonight, which just is definitely him burying the guys on this card.
Could you guys come up with literally anything else to do?
You ever heard Tony Schiavone talk about how him and Larry Zbyszko would bet on how many clotheslines there would be during a WCW Saturday night tape-in?
Oh, Jesus, really?
Yeah, so sometimes you'll hear them really pop on a clothesline, and it means one of them just hit the over on their bet. You just think of those shitty matches from WCW on the WWC show in 1998, and yeah, it's just dudes clotheslining each other.
Oh yeah, just like Steve Dahl and Mike Enos wasting time for 20 minutes. Yeah.
It's hey, I'm gonna stick my arm out, you run into it and fall down.
We can buy 30 seconds before I pick you back up. Then we're going to go get drunk at the bar, make our $200,000.
Reed hits a power slam. He goes for a splash, but Morton gets his knees up. Ricky makes the hot tag to Robert. Gibson comes in, hits a drop kick. Pier 6 brawl breaks out. And Inzaguri sends Reed out to the floor, and Teddy Long falls into the ring. That distracts Gibson. That allows Reed to hit a diving shoulder block from the top rope and get the pin. This was pretty much the standard formula, but it's a pretty good formula.
Yeah, like the Rock and Roll Express did not have bad matches. Like they had it down to a literal science. And even when they experimented with it a little like they did here, they knew that when it was time to get down to it, Ricky was going to do the heat and Robert was going to do the comeback, and then they'd either win or they'd lose, and it didn't really matter because the heat and the comeback was what people came to see.
Gordon Soley interviews Ric Flair. Flair says he got a $2,000 suit custom made to wear for the victory celebration tonight. Flair says that to be the man, Sting has to beat the man, and after tonight, Flair is still going to be the man.
That doesn't look like a $2,000 suit. Can I just be critical in that way? Like, this is
not nice.
Even for 1990, this looks very like 1974. Like I mean, you can do better, Rick. That he usually does better.
All right, it's main event time. It's the match the world has come to see. Ric Flair defends the NWA World Heavyweight Championship against the man called Sting.
All right, Steve, you got to tell me why there are 45 people at ringside.
Well, Sting, the stipulation is Sting has got the dudes with attitudes out at ringside. I think each of them gets to occupy one ring post to make sure the Horsemen can't interfere. And then El Gigante is going to be there too, and Ole Anderson has to be handcuffed to Gigante.
Which is kind of a delightful idea.
Yeah, they sit in folding chairs at the top of the ramp and watch the match together.
And I'm sure what's really happening is that Ole's trying to teach Gigante about wrestling while they watch the match.
Yeah, I'm sure he's explaining to him what's going on and why they're doing what they're doing.
It's not a bad idea, for the head booker to watch the show that way. He can also call some spots or change some stuff up if he wants to. He can cue the Horsemen. If you can come up with a reason why the head booker needs to sit in a folding chair at the top of the ramp, you should probably do it.
Sting is out first in red, white, and blue. From every man's nightmare, this is Sting!
This is cool. And he's probably got the second best music on the show. Yeah. It's just very energetic.
Yeah.
It actually sounds a lot like Warriors music, actually.
It's quite similar.
They get the same push, they're cut from the same cloth, but Sting is so much better.
Sting is actually likable.
And he's every bit the charming goof that Gigante is, but in a charismatic way. Yeah. You want this young man to succeed. He's so earnest.
Flair is out second with Ole Anderson. He is looking sweet in blue trunks, blue knee pads, and blue boots. But they're all slightly different shades of blue is what I like. The trunks are baby blue, and then the knee pads are navy blue, and then the shoes are kind of an aquamarine.
It's really nice.
Yeah. Ric Flair, great gear.
The man just knows how to dress himself. That never really changed.
Like I said, Ole has to be handcuffed to El Gigante, and they sit at the top of the ramp. No other horsemen in sight, and Sting's got all his buddies at ringside, so he should get a fair shake here for once.
You would hope.
Sting initially dominates until Flair goes for the knee. The drama hanging over this match is Sting's knee 100%? Did Sting come back too soon?
And I love it when they have those kind of angles, especially every Ric Flair match basically needs one, right? Because otherwise Ric Flair's not really a threat to anybody.
No, especially since Sting doesn't sell any of his shit.
Yes, exactly.
The only thing Flair can hurt Sting with is by going to the knee. Anything else doesn't faze him. Flair knocks Sting down with a chop on the ramp as the announcer calls 10 minutes gone. Also should mention, match can only be won by pinfall or submission. No disqualifications or countouts. We're going to have a definitive winner here.
Thank God, because everything in this fucking company is a disqualification.
Flair works the knee. He misses a knee drop. Sting locks in the figure four. Flair makes it to the ropes. Flair goes up top. Of course, he gets thrown off. Sting gets him with a backslide for a close 2 count. Flair sweeps the leg. He continues to work the leg over. But Sting makes his comeback. He hits the Stinger Splash. He locks on the Scorpion Deathlock. They are standing in Baltimore here.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Crowd is on fire as it looks like Sting is about to win the title.
It's actually, like, pretty stunning, because because we had just been talking about how it seems like they kind of blew it with Sting, and to a certain extent that they did, but, like, the fans in attendance here definitely don't feel that way. They are ready for this.
The Horsemen show up, but the dudes with attitudes cut him off. Flair manages to get to the ropes. Flair clips Sting's knee. He sets up for the figure four, but Sting rolls him up with a small package and gets the 1, 2, 3. Crowd explodes. Huge pop and sustained roar here.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great moment.
It's like you can see that Sting is actually, because Sting very clearly knows that he has a lot of things to accomplish here. He's got to get up to the top of the ramp. He's got to do his promo. He's got to get to it, but he still seems very clearly overwhelmed by the reaction.
Yeah, so all the faces jump in the ring to celebrate with Sting. Thought they absolutely pulled off, like, the crowning moment here. This is perfect.
Yeah, it seems like they had missed their opportunity, but thankfully the people's hunger for Sting made it so it didn't really matter when it happened. They were ready for it in general. And, like, this is very cool. The promo that Sting cuts at the top of the ramp, where he's just like, thank you so much, Ric Flair. Like, it means so much. It's clearly a shoot, right?
Yeah.
Like, because Rick pulled for him to have this moment, and he wouldn't have had it without him.
No, this is 100% Flair went to bat for Sting and refused to dump the title to Luger instead. And, you know, nothing against Luger, but, like, that was the right thing to do. Like, it's clear Sting is the guy here.
Oh, yeah. If it wasn't already clear, this makes it abundantly clear.
Sting is the man who is going to lead this company into the 90s.
Thank God they didn't blow it.
Yeah. So, yeah, Sting puts Flair over as the greatest champion ever, says he has huge shoes to fill. Thanks the fans. He's our new world champion as we go off the air. Great moment for WCW. Unfortunately, they just didn't have anything to follow up with. They got no challengers for Sting. Like,
see, that really is the problem. Is as good a moment as this is, and it is. Like, it's very exciting. Man, it's just, where do you go? There's no plan.
No, it's too soon for Sid, but that's who they end up having challenge him at Halloween Havoc, and they do a goofy finish where Barry Windham pretends to be Sting, and then the real Sting comes back out, and it's incredibly confusing. We covered that Halloween Havoc. That's in the archives. That's 1990.
Yep.
But yeah, the big thing they have planned for Sting is they have Sting against the Black Scorpion. Who is the Black Scorpion? They have no idea.
They don't even come up with one.
Yeah.
How?
Yeah, just like basically day of Starrcade, when they have to reveal who it is, Flair is just like, okay, I'll do it. Like, don't make anybody else do this. If it's me, everybody will just forget about it the next night.
Yeah, bless him, because Flair at this point is bulletproof, so he gets away with it pretty much scot-free.
No, because otherwise it was going to be Barry Windham, and like he didn't want to put Barry through that.
It would have annihilated Barry Windham. That would have been the end of his career.
But yeah, I mean, that's just like, if you ask, like, why didn't Sting become a bigger star? Like, they probably waited too long to get the belt to him, but, you know, as we see from the reaction here, all's well that ends well. But then they just have nothing for him coming out of this.
They have nothing.
Now, he gets the belt for 6 months. He's this awful feud with the Black Scorpion. And then they just put the belt back on Flair.
It's just flat out reprehensible. Like, they wasted so many years of Sting's career. And like maybe Sting wouldn't have become quite as beloved as he eventually did, and because he represented the guy who stuck with WCW even while they just fucked him over again and again and again, and that engendered a lot of love and sympathy for him that they cashed in on at Starrcade '97. But like that's a long road to go when you could have just made the money now, guys.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, interesting show overall. I mean, you can see the potential of this company, but they just cannot harness it because they have Ole Anderson and Jim Herd running the show.
Unfortunately.
No, and that's just the story of WCW for years. It's just awful management, terrible booking.
Like all the talent in the goddamn world.
Yeah, every time we watch one of these shows, we marvel at the talent on the card, but then we marvel at how poorly they're being used and how there's never any direction, how they can never get anybody over, how they can never have any consistency in their storylines. It's just bad booking.
It's despicable. Like, there's nothing worse than wasted potential.
No. And there's so much of it in this company in this era.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that is a wrap on the 1990 Great American Bash. Next time, we have another Great American Bash, the disastrous WWE Great American Bash 2006. If you enjoy hearing us bury shows, you're going to love next week because it is really, really bad.
Oh, come on, Steve. How bad could it really be? I mean, like what we just did Great American Bash, what, 2004?
That was pretty bad.
Can it be that bad?
I'll see your JBL Eddie Guerrero bull rope match and raise you a Punjabi prison match.
Oh, is this at least the good one with Batista?
It's not.
No.
And remember how excited you were for Batista versus Mark Henry? Well, Mark Henry blew his knee out, so actually it's Batista versus Mr. Kennedy instead.
No.
And remember how excited you were when Rey Mysterio got the title at WrestleMania?
Uh-huh.
Well, he's actually been totally jobbed out since then.
Oh my God, this is such a dark place you're sending me to.
And you know how you were really excited to see Bobby Lashley?
Yeah.
Well, he has elevated liver enzymes and can't wrestle on the show.
What does that even mean? That's horrible.
Yeah, that's code for he failed a drug test.
Damn it.
That's code for.
This show sucks ass.
All that and more next time on the Lawcast. Happy 4th of July. Enjoy it. Celebrate safely. We'll see you again next week.